The Galactic Council had always been a place of spectacle. Built on the world of Sarath, the council chamber gleamed with towering arches of crystal and stone, its walls etched with the history of empires older than Earth's first civilizations. Stars glimmered beyond the dome, as though the universe itself leaned close to listen. Here, across the vast chamber, every major species gathered to debate, to boast, and to guard their influence. It was into this crucible that Envoy Marcus Hale walked, Earth's first appointed diplomat to stand before the galaxy's great powers. His attire was simple, dark fabric without decoration, a single emblem of Earth on his chest. Compared to the ornate robes and jeweled crests of the other delegations, he looked plain. But his stride was measured, his gaze steady, as though he carried the weight of an entire planet on his shoulders. The chamber hushed when his voice first rang out. "Honored delegates, I come not to challenge, but to join. Humanity seeks a place among you, to share knowledge, trade, and responsibility." Murmurs rippled through the gathered envoys. Some regarded him with curiosity, others with thinly veiled disdain. The elder species had seen newcomers before, fragile, eager, and easily bent to stronger wills. To them, humanity was no different. Then came the reply, sharp and mocking. Vorthal, High Speaker of the Dravari Dominion, rose from his seat. His tall frame gleamed with scaled armor, his crest shimmering with challenge. Earth speaks of unity. Yet what have they endured? They are young, barely past their first steps among the stars. Should such a child sit in the Council of Ancients? The chamber stirred with agreement. The Dravari had long positioned themselves as guardians of tradition, and many feared to contradict them. Hale did not flinch. His words were calm. Every species here was once young. You were given the chance to prove your worth. All we ask is the same. Vorthal's crest flared, his voice carrying like a blade across the chamber. Then let Earth prove itself by fire. The right of judgment is clear. Let their envoy face trial, as ours did in ages past. The announcement struck like thunder. The rite of fire was an ancient ceremony, seldom invoked and more symbolic than practical. It was meant to test resolve, not destroy. But the Dravari's tone was unmistakable. They wanted a spectacle, one that would humiliate Earth and warn other newcomers of their place. The council murmured uneasily. A few protested, but none dared openly defy the Dominion. At last, the presiding Ashari speaker nodded with quiet reluctance. So it shall be. The envoy will undergo the trial. Later, within the waiting chambers, aides whispered frantically to Hale. "You can refuse," one urged. "Decline the right and request arbitration. None will fault you." But Hale shook his head. "If I refuse, Earth looks weak. If I accept, we are seen as willing to stand." His expression was steady, though his aides saw the shadow in his eyes. He knew what was expected of him. When the chamber doors opened again, silence fell. Hale stepped into the center of the council floor, where a dais of ancient stone awaited. A circle of light surrounded it, humming with energy. The fire would come from plasma vents, controlled by ritual overseers. It was meant to scorch, to frighten, to test endurance. But in the Dominion's hands, mercy was unlikely. As the glow built around him, Hale lifted his chin. He looked out across the chamber, not at the Dravari, not at the species who watched with hidden fear, but at the stars beyond the dome. His voice was quiet, almost lost in the rising hum. Earth will remember this day. The plasma flared, and light consumed him. Delegates leaned forward, expecting screams, but none came. Through the flames, Hale's eyes locked on Vorthal. Calm, unwavering, his body withered in fire, yet his stare did not break. That silent defiance would be etched into memory long after the flames died, And far beyond Sarath, silent fleets of human warships drifted among the stars, their sensors already fixed on the system, awaiting the word that humanity had been tested. The eye. Smell of scorched air lingered long after the plasma fire dimmed. For a heartbeat, silence clung to the chamber. The dais, where Marcus Hale had stood, was empty now. His form dissolved into drifting embers that floated briefly before vanishing into the council's circulation currents. Some envoys lowered their heads. Others turned away. But Vorthal of the Dravari remained standing, his crest raised in triumph. His voice echoed like iron across the chamber. Behold, this is the measure of Earth, fragile, unprepared, a people of words, not strength. Let this be a lesson to all who would waste our time with petitions of unworthy races. The words cut deep, though not everyone was convinced. Whispers rose from the side galleries where smaller delegations sat. They spoke quietly, uncertainly, of the envoy's calm defiance, the way he had looked through the flames without surrender. Yet none dared voice such thoughts aloud. The presiding Ashari speaker raised her slender hand, her tone carefully even. The rite has been carried out. The matter of Earth's petition will be recorded as denied. Her voice held no approval, but neither did it offer protest. Neutrality was her duty, though her eyes lingered on the ashes with something more. Perhaps regret. As the assembly dissolved, Vorthal's delegation moved through the chamber with pride. They exchanged words with their allies, basking in the display of dominance. But when their eyes met the envoys of other species, they caught glimmers of unease. For while the Dravari saw Hale's death as a warning, others had seen something different. A man who had not begged, not broken, not given the Dominion the satisfaction of fear. In the private halls that wound behind the council chamber, conversation shifted into hushed tones. Representatives from the Lothari Confederation exchanged quiet words with the insectoid Sarin, their antennae trembling with concern. "Did you see his gaze?" one whispered. "Even as he burned. That is not the look of a broken people." But, for every voice of doubt, others urged caution. "The Dravari are too strong," said a delegate from the Jirak clans. "To side with Earth now would risk their wrath." And so, most said nothing at all. Far across the stars, however, silence had a different meaning. Signals had already raced outward from Sarath, encrypted pulses carried by couriers, relays, and hidden channels. Within hours, the message would reach human colonies and the command posts of Earth's defense fleets. Words spoken calmly by Hale before the fire claimed him, Earth will remember this day, would become both report and vow. In the meantime, the Dominion celebrated. Vorthal spoke to assembled envoys at a banquet that evening, his words smooth with practiced arrogance. "Let Earth's fate remind you all that this council is no place for dreamers. Power is the only currency of survival, and those who cannot wield it have no claim among the stars." The hall echoed with polite applause. Yet beneath the surface, currents shifted. A handful of envoys excused themselves early, retreating to private chambers. They had seen not weakness, but resolve. And they wondered what consequence might follow. On the quiet decks of Sarath's spaceport, a small courier vessel detached from its berth. Its drive flared briefly before vanishing into the black. It carried no goods, no passengers of importance, only a coded transmission, invisible to most sensors, bound for the blue-green planet that had just been insulted before the galaxy. Marcus. Hale's ashes still lingered in the council chamber, swept into vents and forgotten by the Dominion. But memory is not so easily erased. For those who had watched carefully, the trial had revealed more than intended. Humanity had been tested not in strength of arms, but in the strength of one man's will. And even as the Dravari gloated, as the council chose silence, as the stars wheeled on indifferent to one more death, the first ripples of consequence began to spread. For in humanity's silence there was no surrender, only waiting. The council chamber was cleaned with efficiency, as though the trial of fire had been nothing more than another scheduled debate. Ashes were swept away, the dais polished until no trace of Marcus Hale remained. By morning, the place looked untouched. To most of the galaxy, life moved on. Yet among the envoys who had witnessed the event, the memory lingered. They recalled the moment when Hale, even as the plasma seared around him, had met the eyes of Vorthal without faltering. That image, brief as it was, unsettled them in ways the Dominion had not intended. Still, the official record was clear. Earth's petition was denied. The envoy had perished. The Dominion declared victory, and many others chose silence. That silence was safer than defiance. But outside the council chamber, whispers spread like faint ripples across a still pond. The Lethari Confederation, cautious observers of galactic politics, met in closed rooms to discuss the envoy's composure. "He knew he would die," one of their delegates said softly. "And yet he did not resist, did not plead. What kind of people send someone to burn and expect him to meet death so calmly? The Sarin, an insectoid species with memory that spanned generations, stored the image within their ancestral archives. For them, every expression and gesture carried meaning. Hale's final look was catalogued not as surrender, but as signal. A warning that Earth was not finished. The Dravari, of course, dismissed such thoughts. To them, Hale's silence was proof of insignificance. He had no words left, Vorthal declared at another gathering. Earth's envoy knew his place. The trial of fire revealed their weakness, and their weakness is final. Yet across trade routes and relay stations, something unusual began to happen. Earth's merchant ships, once common along the mid-rim markets, grew scarce. Human traders who had bartered spices, alloys, and art simply vanished from the usual circuits. Their absence was subtle at first, easily explained as a coincidence. But then came the second absence, and the third. Within weeks, entire trade networks that had once seen regular human presence went quiet. At first, other species assumed it was fear, humanity retreating from the humiliation of the Council, but those who paid closer attention noticed a pattern. The ships weren't destroyed nor delayed. They were recalled one by one to places unknown. In distant colonies, governors spoke to their citizens with words chosen carefully, urging patience and preparation. On Earth itself, far from Serath's shining halls, vast shipyards shifted from commerce to something sterner. Signals pulsed through encrypted bands, and fleets began to form where the galaxy's eyes seldom looked. Yet outwardly, Earth remained silent. No threats were issued. No vengeance was declared. They simply withdrew. That silence became a weight upon the Council. Delegates who had once laughed at the envoy's death now avoided speaking of it. Some told themselves that humanity had been chastened. Others, though they would not admit it aloud, wondered if the silence was deliberate. At a banquet, weeks after the trial, one of the Ashari advisors confided quietly to his counterpart from the Telnari. The Dravari made a mistake. They think fire ends a people. But I saw the envoy's eyes. He knew something we did not. The Telnari gave a slow nod, their voice low. Yes, and I fear we will all learn what that was. Meanwhile, in the AA, cold reaches beyond charted lanes. Human fleets waited. They did not broadcast their presence, did not announce their intent. Instead, they watched. They tracked Dominion patrols, noted weaknesses, and measured responses. For though Marcus Hale's body had been reduced to ash before the Council, his final words remained. Earth will remember this day, and humanity's silence was not absence. It was a gathering storm. The weeks following the envoy's death should have faded into routine. The council was accustomed to tragedy, to disputes and punishments woven into the fabric of politics. But this time was different. Something intangible clung to every gathering since the Rite of Fire. An unease that grew heavier with each session. Delegates who had once filled the chamber with vibrant speeches now spoke with caution. Where there had been laughter at Earth's expense, there was now restraint. Even the simplest mentions of the Dominion drew quieter tones. It was the silence of Earth that unsettled them. No protests, no envoys sent in appeal, no emissaries to beg for reconsideration. Humanity simply vanished from the stage, as though waiting. And waiting, everyone knew, was rarely a good sign. The Ashari speaker finally addressed it, her voice carrying across the chamber. The matter of Earth remains, unresolved, though it was marked as closed. I must ask, do we believe silence equals surrender? Vorthal of the Dravari rose swiftly, his crest shining with confidence. Of course it does. Earth has no power to contest their fate. Their envoy was tested and failed. Their retreat is proof that they know their place. But murmurs rose from the other seats, faint but undeniable. The Lethari representative leaned forward. If they knew their place, would they have allowed their envoy to stand before us at all? He was calm in his final moments. That was not the look of a people. Broken, Vorthal scoffed. You give too much weight to a dying man's expression. Words and glances cannot shape destiny. Perhaps not, the insectoid Sarin delegate interjected, their voice clicking sharply. But silence can, and their silence is not natural. They withdraw not in defeat, but in design. The chamber rippled with unease. For the first time in cycles, voices openly contradicted the Dominion. The tension grew sharp, and Vorthal's glare silenced some of them. But the doubt had been spoken. Outside the chamber, whispers hardened into suspicion. Small outposts along the frontier began reporting unusual activity. Human ships gathering in clusters, routes shifting without explanation. A merchant convoy from the mid-rim claimed they had passed through a sector and seen no fewer than 20 human frigates moving in formation, silent and dark, their hulls unmarked by trade insignia. When the report reached Serath, Vorthal dismissed it as fabrication. Merchants tell stories to raise their prices. Do not mistake their tales for truth. Yet others were not so sure. The Ashari counselors, careful observers of political undercurrents, noted that even Dominion patrols had begun to return late from their routes near human space. Their reports were incomplete, their transmissions filled with interference. More than once, patrol ships failed to return entirely, but the most unsettling sign came not from fleets or patrols. It came from the markets. The disappearance of human merchants had left gaps in trade. Alloys unique to Earth, medicines derived from their world's flora, and cultural artifacts that once flowed steadily into galactic circulation had vanished. Prices rose, supply chains faltered, and with every missing shipment, the memory of the envoy's burning grew sharper. At a private gathering in the council's lower halls, envoys spoke in hushed tones. The Telnari, long neutral in most disputes, whispered, "The Dominion believed. They silenced Earth, but instead they have given them a reason, and reason is far more dangerous than anger." The Sarin delegates' antennae trembled. They wait. They watch. When they move, it will not be a plea for entry. It will be something greater. Vorthal remained outwardly confident, but within the Dominion's inner circles, even his allies grew uneasy. Reports filtered in, too many to ignore. A colony supply depot found stripped but not destroyed, its resources taken with surgical precision. A Dominion listening post reported unknown signals before falling silent. The Dominion dismissed them as accidents, pirates, or natural hazards. But one truth was becoming clear to the rest of the council. Humanity's silence was not emptiness. It was intent. And though the stars of Serath still shone brightly over the chamber for the first time, the delegates began to feel a shadow crossing them. The first undeniable sign came at the fringe of Dominion space. A patrol of 3 Dravari cruisers entered the unremarkable system of harness, expecting routine inspection. They were seasoned vessels, their hulls dark with the scars of past victories. Yet when they arrived, the station they were meant to resupply was gone. Not destroyed. Gone. The asteroid upon which the station had been built was stripped clean, its surface carved with precision. Habitats, docking arms, power cores, all dismantled as though taken apart piece by piece. Not a trace of battle remained. No debris fields, no energy signatures, only silence and a gap where industry once thrived. The patrol sent reports and began a search, but none returned. Weeks later, fragments of their hull plating were found drifting at the edge of the system. The markings had been burned away, leaving nothing but smooth steel. To many, it looked less like wreckage and more like a warning deliberately placed. When word reached Serath, the council chamber erupted. The Ashari speaker called for explanations, but none satisfied. Vorthal thundered, "This is piracy! Outlaws emboldened by Earth's cowardice." But the Lothari countered softly, "Outlaws do not dismantle stations without leaving waste. Outlaws do not silence 3 Dominion cruisers without trace. There is order in this. Precision." A low murmur spread, delegates leaning toward one another. For weeks, they had whispered doubts. Now, for the first time, fear sharpened those doubts into certainty. The Ashari raised her hand to quiet them. If Earth is responsible, then they act in secrecy. But what is secrecy, if not a choice? They do not yet declare war, but they do not bow. They move unseen, and the Dominion cannot stop them. Vorthal slammed his claw against the table. "You will not speak of Earth as equals. They are nothing but—" He stopped himself, for even he felt the change in the room. Too many eyes lingered on him, not with agreement, but with suspicion. His voice, once a command, now sounded defensive. That evening, in the private halls, smaller factions gathered. The Telnari, the Sarin, even the reclusive Vor came together for quiet discussion. Reports had reached them as well, human vessels moving along uncharted routes, fleets seen in formation at the edge of deep space, merchant contracts voided in favor of silence. The Vor delegate, a being of crystalline form, spoke with measured tones. Earth withdraws from trade, not because they cannot sell, but because they choose not to. They deny the galaxy their goods. This is not retreat. It is leverage. The Sarin clicked in agreement. Their envoy's death gave them reason. Now they prepare. The Dominion may think them weak, but I tell you this, weakness does not dismantle stations in silence. Across the stars, humanity continued its quiet work. Colonies long thought small revealed fleets hidden in orbit. Shipyards that once produced merchant freighters now gave rise to carriers and escorts. Civilian populations drilled, not for trade, but for defense. Each action carried out without fanfare, without broadcast, yet no less deliberate. Still, no declaration came. No threats were issued. The silence stretched, longer and heavier, and in that silence, fear grew. Merchants on the rim began refusing Dominion contracts. "Too dangerous," they whispered. "Too many patrols go missing near human lanes." Colonists in neutral territories began storing human-made weapons in secret, trading at high prices for Earth's devices. Even within the Dominion, cracks formed. Minor governors wrote to Vorthal with concern. "If these disappearances continue, our citizens will lose faith in your strength." Vorthal raged, but his words no longer carried the weight they once did. He had burned Earth's envoy before the stars, yet the stars now carried whispers of Earth's quiet answer. The Ashari speaker, in a private moment, confided to her aides. This silence will not last forever. The question is not if Earth will speak, but how. For in the absence of words, humanity's actions were already shaping a message, and the galaxy waited, balanced on the edge of fear. The Council's chamber no longer rang with certainty. Once, it had been the Dominion's theater, filled with booming declarations and unquestioned dominance. Now it felt like a stage where shadows lingered just outside the lights, whispering of things unseen. Reports came in daily, patrols missing, relay stations silenced, trade routes abandoned. Always the same pattern, no battles recorded, no wreckage to study. Only absence. And absence, repeated enough, became fear. Vorthal, however, would not yield. To him, silence was insult enough, but whispers of human strength were intolerable. At a gathering heavy with unease, he rose to speak before the council. The galaxy bends too easily to rumor. You let shadows dictate your fears. You speak of silence as though it is thunder. But I will show you that Earth is nothing. Their envoy died as he lived, weak, unremarkable. Their fleets will do the same. He announced then what none had expected. A Dominion fleet of 30 warships would cross directly into human space. Not a patrol, not a probe, but a full demonstration of power. We will strike at their colonies, take their worlds, and scatter their people until they beg for council mercy. Let this be the end of their whispers. The declaration sent ripples across the chamber. The Ashari protested, urging caution. Provocation risks more than you imagine. If Earth has planned as we suspect— Vorthal cut her off, his voice thundering. Suspect is not fact. Fear is not truth. The Dominion does not wait for prey to bare its fangs. And with that, the vote was forced. The Dominion's allies, unwilling to oppose Vorthal outright, conceded. The fleet would march. The news spread across the stars like lightning. On neutral worlds, fear mixed with fascination. Could humans withstand such a force? Could they truly defy the Dominion openly? Traders speculated, refugees whispered, and council delegates held their breath. The fleet departed in gleaming formation, banners of the Dominion stretching across space. For many, it was reassurance. Here was proof that power still rested with the old order. For others, it was dread, for they remembered the envoy's eyes and wondered what the humans had been preparing for in silence. 3 weeks later, the first reports arrived. The Dominion fleet entered human-controlled space at the colony of Arcadia Prime, a lush world of oceans and forests. They expected panic, perhaps token resistance. Instead, they found silence. No ships met them, no weapons fired. The world hung quiet, its orbital docks empty. They descended. That was when the silence broke. From the dark side of the moon came human ships, sleek and unmarked. At first, only a handful, then dozens. They did not broadcast warnings or demands. They moved with precision, forming lines that cut across the Dominion fleet's advance. The Dominion admiral, confident in numbers, ordered the attack. Plasma lances struck, missiles fired, energy beams cut through the void, but the human vessels moved with frightening coordination. Their hulls absorbed punishment that should have shattered them, and their return fire was unlike anything the Dominion had catalogued. Weapons struck not to destroy, but to disable. Engines burned out. Power grids collapsed. In minutes, Dominion cruisers found themselves adrift, unable to maneuver. The humans advanced further, their silence more terrifying than any war cry. A single Dominion ship managed to transmit fragments of the battle before falling dark. In those fragments, the last image seared into the Council's records. Dominion cruisers spinning helpless, pinned by unseen forces, while human ships hovered in formation, silent and patient as hunters. Of 30 Dominion vessels, only 2 returned. The others were gone, captured, dismantled, or simply vanished. When the news reached Sarath, the council erupted in chaos. Some demanded explanation, others demanded war. The Ashari, her voice trembling. With both awe and dread, spoke the words none wanted to hear. The envoy told us Earth would remember, and now, so will we. Vorthal sat silent for the first time in memory. His claws clenched, his crest dimmed. The Dominion had overreached, and in doing so, they had revealed what silence had hidden. Humanity was no longer preparing. Humanity had already arrived. The Dominion's banners still hung in the council chamber, but they no longer inspired confidence. They looked like relics, tattered reminders of power that had failed when tested. For centuries, the Dominion's rule had been enforced by fear, by fleets too large for any single world to resist. But now, after Arcadia Prime, that fear no longer belonged to them. The survivors of the failed campaign returned to Sarath, their ships limping into orbit under escort. They brought stories that spread faster than the Council could contain, human ships that moved like blades, weapons that cut without killing, silence that pressed harder than fire. The Council gathered in full, and for the first time in living memory. The Dominion's voice trembled. Vorthal stood at the center of the chamber, but his usual thunder was absent. His crest had dulled, his posture stiff. He spoke with fury, yes, but beneath it was something the others had never heard. From him, hesitation. They did not defeat us, he insisted. They only surprised us. Their strength is not infinite. We will regroup. We will strike again. But his words were drowned by murmurs. The Ashari raised her hand, her gaze sharp. 30 warships. 30 against a colony world. And yet, only 2 return. You call this surprise, but I call it revelation. Earth is not what you told us it was. Others joined in. The Lethari, usually quiet, spoke with cutting calm. If the Dominion misjudged so greatly, then what else have you? Hidden? How many times have you demanded tribute for protection that now proves hollow? The chamber erupted in voices, some demanding answers, others demanding change. For the first time, cracks opened in the Dominion's authority before all eyes. Outside the Council, the galaxy stirred. Neutral worlds that had once relied on the Dominion began reaching toward humanity instead, seeking trade, seeking protection. Whisper networks lit up with stories of Earth's fleets moving through shadowed lanes, always unseen until the moment of need. A convoy beset by pirates reported a human ship emerging silently, driving the raiders away before vanishing again. No broadcasts, no demands, only quiet strength. Merchants spoke of human technologies, engines that could outpace Dominion cruisers, shields that absorbed fire without flicker, weapons that chose their targets with surgical precision. Whether rumor or truth, the stories spread faster than fact could keep pace. And with each retelling, the Dominion's image dimmed. Vorthal's allies felt the shift as keenly as he did. In private halls, some began to distance themselves, whispering of new orders to come. Others questioned whether their loyalty to the Dominion was now a liability. Even among the Dominion soldiers, discipline frayed. Few wished to be sent into human space after Arcadia Prime. Then came the second blow. A Dominion outpost along the border vanished, an entire station and its garrison of 5,000. In its place was a single transmission, a simple repeating. Signal. No threats, no words, just the steady rhythm of a heartbeat. It played across every channel for hours before fading. The effect was devastating. To the Dominion, it was mockery. To the Council, it was proof of power wielded with precision. To the galaxy at large, it was a symbol that humanity had not only survived, but claimed the right to stand as equals among the stars. When the Council met again, the Ashari no longer spoke with caution. We must recognize Earth, not as petitioners, not as subjects, but as peers. If we do not, we risk more than pride. We risk the future of this council itself." Vorthal struck the table, but fewer joined his protest. His once iron grip had weakened. He looked around the chamber and saw doubt in every face, cracks spreading where once there had been obedience. The envoy's burning had been meant to silence Earth forever. Instead, it had set fire to the Dominion's throne, and as humanity's silent fleets spread further across the void, the old order began to crumble, piece by piece. The council chamber had changed. Where once banners of the Dominion hung proud and unchallenged, they now drooped like relics of an old age. The air was thick with tension. Delegates who had once spoken in careful deference to Vorthal now muttered among themselves, their voices carrying sharper edges. Fear still lingered, but it was no longer fear of the Dominion. It was fear of what humanity might do next. Weeks had passed since the vanishing of the Dominion outpost, and silence had stretched long enough to make the galaxy restless. Human. Fleets had been seen again, gliding like shadows across neutral systems, always precise, never lingering. They defended merchant convoys, dismantled raider havens, and disappeared before thanks could even be spoken. Their silence had become a language of its own, calm, deliberate, and unyielding. At last, the silence ended. A transmission arrived at Sarath, not from a Dominion envoy, nor from any ally, but from Earth itself. The message was short, unadorned, and delivered without ceremony. Yet when it played in the council chamber, every delegate leaned forward, listening as though the stars themselves had spoken. A figure appeared, a human dressed not in armor or finery, but in simple attire. No weapons at his side, no banners behind him. His voice was calm, steady, and carried the weight of certainty. "Your Dominion burned our envoy. You believed we would bow or vanish. Instead, we endured. We remembered. And we built. You have. Seen a glimpse of what we can do, but make no mistake. We do not seek conquest. We do not seek to rule. We seek only respect and the freedom to walk among the stars as equals. But understand this. If you deny us that right, if you again try to silence us, then you will discover that silence is not weakness. It is patience. And patience ends when justice is due. The message ended there, without flourish, without demand. Only clarity. The chamber erupted in uproar. Some shouted in alarm, others in awe. But amid the storm of voices, a quiet truth emerged. Earth had spoken not as supplicants, but as peers. And peers could no longer be ignored. The Ashari, her voice steady, rose to address the room. We have a choice. We can cling to fear, or we can recognize what has already become clear. Earth has claimed its place among us, not through demands, but through resolve. If we deny them now, we deny the reality before our eyes. Others echoed her sentiment. The Lethari delegate nodded slowly, his words sharp. The Dominion promised safety, but their fleets faltered. Earth promised nothing, yet they delivered strength. Which, I ask, is worthy of respect. Vorthal rose one last time. His voice, though still loud, no longer carried command. You would bend to them, to those who defied us, to those who humiliated the Dominion before the stars. The Vor delegate answered with crystalline calm. No, we do not bend. We stand beside them. That is what the Dominion has never understood. Silence filled the chamber again, but this time it was different. It was the silence of decision. And in that silence, the Dominion's throne cracked beyond repair. Days later, the Council announced the recognition of Earth as a sovereign equal among the stars. Not a subject, not a vassal, but a peer. The news swept across the galaxy. To the oppressed, it was hope. To the neutral, it was balance. To the Dominion, it was the end of an age. Human fleets no longer moved in secrecy. They flew openly now. Not in challenge, but in presence. Their banners did not proclaim conquest, but unity, an unspoken promise that humanity would not forget what had been done, but neither would they allow such injustice to define them. On Earth, people watched. The first broadcasts of human ships moving side by side with those of other civilizations. Children pointed to the stars with wonder. Veterans wept, not for war but for recognition. The envoy's death had not been in vain. His flame had lit a path that no power could extinguish. And across the galaxy, whispers grew into certainty. Humanity had endured the fire. Humanity had risen from silence. Humanity had claimed its place, not through domination, but through resolve that no empire could burn away. It was, at last, a new dawn.